Good evening, everybody. And so as Rich said, I'm Dave Brown, president of Mass Bay, and I'm actually got two programs for you tonight, if we can all hold out that long. The one that I was invited to present is one that I did in somewhat different form for Mass Bay back in November. And it's basically a look back at a few RRE excursions of the 1970s, primarily with photographs from our longtime member and former treasurer, Art Bliss. So we're going to start off with that. This is a somewhat altered presentation in that when I did it for Mass Bay, it turned out that the quality of the images I had was pretty much thumbnail quality. And so I wasn't able to really present them in full screen, in a PowerPoint or anything like that. And since then, Art has actually delivered me all of the original slides, and I rescanned them at much higher resolution. So should be a lot better quality. I have scaled back the number of trips that I'm going to show tonight, however, just to allow for the second part of the program. But before I mention that, let me also put in a pitch for one thing that we're doing. Mass Bay RE will be running a train excursion, our first excursion in about a year and a half, the Lincoln Limited on the Hobo and Winnipesaukee railroads on Saturday, May 21st. The trip starts in Meredith at 9 a.m. We're going to be traveling, going to highball up to Lincoln. This will be the first time that, to our knowledge, a revenue passenger train has gone over a lot of the track north of Plymouth up to where the dinner train normally turns around. It's the first time since I think it was 2006. And after about a 1 hour layover, if everything goes according to plan at Lincoln, we'll be heading back south into the sun, making a few photo stops along the way, including at Ashland, and getting back into Meredith about 5:30. At this point, we have a very few number of seats left. Probably somewhere between 15 and 20, depending on whether they get bought by people that are buying 2 tickets or people that are buying 1 ticket, because we block out the extra seat next to the person, anybody that bought 1 ticket. So they're not going to last much longer. And so if you want to go, the link to all the trip information and to order it is on our website, massbayrre.org. And you can order online. That's the most convenient thing to do. If you get stuck on that, you can always call up. And if I'm still in town, I'll try to take care of you. And the key thing for you folks, because you are one of our brother organizations, if there are any of you who are members of the 470 Club and want to do the trip and are not members of Mass Bay RRE, you can still get the member fare on the online order form. There's a spot to put in a coupon code, and if you put in 470, that will get you $10 off the price of your ticket, which brings you back down to the Mass Bay member fare. So keep that in mind. That actually applies for any excursion we run, and we do have a couple more we're planning for later in the year. So anyway, back to the program at hand. So the second program, which was one that we didn't advertise because I wasn't sure whether I was going to be able to get the program put together for tonight, and I actually finished it about an hour ago, is a look back at a trip that actually you folks, the 470 Club, ran in June of 1990 on the Canadian Atlantic Railroad, an excursion that went from Brownville Junction across to McAdam down to St. Andrew as far as the line went at that time, and then back up from St. Stephen. It was a 2-day trip. So I've got, these are all my slides in the second part of that, and hopefully we'll get to it. If everybody is, things drag on too long or people get bored or whatever, I'm actually presenting that program again tomorrow night for the Mass Bay RRE meeting, along with a show of material, photographs I've collected from a number of sources on the nickel plate 759 trip in 1973 that went from North Station to in Boston up to Montpelier, Vermont. This was actually run by Steamtown. It wasn't technically an RRE trip. And it's a rather famous trip in part because of a lot of complications that they had trying to refuel the locomotive on Sunday morning. So anyway, with that, as Rich said, if you have any questions or comments along the way, but if it's just sort of random comments, you know, put them up on the chat. I'll try to keep my eye on that. But if you have a question or something, or you know, whatever, I don't mind if you unmute yourself and try to get my attention as I ramble on. And you know, happy to entertain that. You're not going to throw me off track too much. And one thing I probably won't want to do is go backwards too much in the slideshow. So if we need to go back and look at some stuff, we can always do that at the end of the show. So hopefully this will all work according to plan. Okay, so this first part is photographs done by and large by Art Bliss. So the first trip we're gonna show you is a June 12, 1971 trip on the Claremont and Concord Railroad in western New Hampshire, which connected to the Boston and Maine. And this particular trip in 1971 also included a chunk of the track of the Claremont Electric Railway that went up to West Claremont. Interspersed with this will be also going to be some pictures interspersed of a later trip that that we did that I was actually on. I was not involved with the Railroad Enthusiast back in 1971. I was still dealing with college and all that stuff. So anyway, so the trip actually started out and it went out all the way to Newport, New Hampshire. And it was called the Covered Bridges Ramble because there were one or two covered bridges on the line out on the way to Newport. And this is what's called the Piers Covered Bridge. You can't do this anymore. This excursion consisted of a couple of gondolas and Claremont and Concord. I think that's a 48 tonner or 44 tonner, number 18. And of course, the rail line is long gone. It's a trail now, but the bridge is still quite there. You can see it's been reinforced with some additional supports underneath the piers, but it's still there and you can still ride through it today. You just can't do it on a train. So after doing a photo stop there, everybody piled back into the gondola cars. And off they went. This is trestle at Northville, New Hampshire. Again, you see they had folding chairs in the gondolas, which you know, provided some modicum of comfort, I suppose. Anyway, the trip got up to Newport, and at that time, of course, there wasn't any train service there, and the depot was looking rather sad, all boarded up. You can see the train on the side there. But Oh, and then there was just a few views of our train and locomotive there. And a lot of the buildings are still there. So we had they had three gondola cars and hairstyles of the time. I don't know who any of these people are. Some of them are probably no longer with us. And, you know, this kid should be ready to take over a railroad club before too long here. So, and this is actually a, this was the depot in 1990, where it been restored and converted to a medical building. So even though there's no trains around there, at least the, you know, one element of the history of the railroad to Newport has survived and still carries on some of that. So back on the train, everybody crowded around, heading west back out of Newport. Back through the covered bridge again. And finally arriving back at Claremont. And at this point, some of the more interesting running started to take place. This is along Main Street in Claremont, the railroad, because this part was the electric railway, actually went right up through town. So there's a lot of street running here. This is from the 1990 trip, which I was on, and that's Art Bliss, who took most of the other pictures. I don't know how many of these people you'll know. Steve Butterworth, still on our trip committee. Beard's a different color now. Tom Humphrey back there, who's our secretary now. And this is so long ago, it's kind of hard to put identify some of the other people. I'm sure with a little help, I probably could. And this is see, I think this is a 1990 trip. Yeah, I think this is still the 1990 trip. Anyway, the track, this is a Google Street View of things as they are pretty much today. And that last picture was taken, the tracks went right up through there, and you can see that little gap through the woods where the railroad went. And then down below this picture was all street running. And this was referred to as a tunnel under Myrtle Street. This was the 1990 trip. Vic Campbell, who passed away last year, a stalwart of the railroad enthusiast for many, many years. And I don't know whether that's the back of Lenny Batchelder's head or not, but anyway, this was the tunnel's still there, but the railroad ain't. So moving on, this is this mill building, which is still standing, and this is coming up Main Street and crossing a bridge here over the Sugar River. Another view of the same thing with the train a little bit further along. And actually up here is the car that had been making the turn in the previous picture. And this is more or less the same view today. The building on the left is the same building. The bridge has been rebuilt. The tracks had come up from that corner, made the turn, whoops, and come around there. So they came up there, around beside this mill building and continued on. Totally gone. You'd never know there was a railroad. A railroad had been there. And then continuing on. This is again near Myrtle Street. Now go a little bit further north. This is up on to West Claremont, and this is the running alongside Route 12, I believe it is, and yeah, New Hampshire 12. And at this point, I don't think they were able to run the locomotive around the train, so I think they just shoved out the West Claremont and then pulled back. So what's there today? Well, that's what it looks like today. The buildings in the background there are the same buildings. The railroad went right along there, alongside the river. And then we come back, and this is turning onto Allen Street, south from Union Street in Claremont. And again, the track goes right along, a lot of street running here and along this little embankment. And then there's actually a switch down there, and there's an industrial customer back up in here on the right side that was still being served by the railroad. And that's what that looks like today. A lot of the buildings on the right side are gone. Where the track used to be now is just a sidewalk or a walking path. And we get down a little further, and we'd only taken, I guess they'd only taken one gondola up, maybe it's two, it's hard to tell there, up to West Claremont. So this is actually the switch that went into that plant there. And yeah, it's pretty much the same view today. Again, the Google Street View. That's the side of the same building that you saw on the left side of the previous picture. And this is the motley crew posing for the camera. Our sophisticated boarding system here laying in front. And many of you have been around for a while. You may remember Larry Blank, a stalwart of the railroad enthusiasts back in the 70s, with his ever-present large megaphone to keep track of folks. Woe be to the rail fan that transgressed the way Larry wanted things done, particularly on a photo line. And the trip continuing further up, headed back toward down into Claremont and toward Myrtle Street again. I think this one's the yeah, this is along Tyler Street. So this is a later picture that I took from 1990. And this is pretty much what it looks like today. You can see the brown garage over there, and brown garage is still there. The railroad ran up a bit of an embankment on the right side of that picture. And then end of the day in 1971, back at Claremont Junction with locomotive. And so that was that one. Any questions or comments about that one before we move on?
Does these diesel locomotives been? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, what were you saying there, Colin?
Where the two diesels had since been sold to other railroads despite the railroad being abandoned?
I have absolutely no idea.
Well, just
no
saying.
idea at all. That's not my area of expertise, I'll tell you. So anyway.
Okay.
Okay, anyway, let's okay, let's just move on here. And the next trip we're going to do was an October 16th, 1971 trip on the Boston and Maine. Went from Boston North Station up to Concord, Plymouth to Lincoln and return. Pretty much the same trip we're doing in May, but a lot more to it and a lot more cars, 8 Bud cars. And then there was a bus connection that took the group over to White Mountain Central, where they rode behind Heisler number 4. So not a lot of stuff along the way here, but this is Bud cars arriving in after arriving in Lincoln. And and I'll get a few more views of the train at Lincoln. Historic view of the Lincoln station going back probably into the 1930s, I believe it would have been. Let's see. Yeah, I don't have a date on that. During this period, an awful lot of the RRE excursions on the B&M were done with Bud cars. And this is just a little bit beyond the station and the East Branch and Lincoln, the logging railroad connected up there. So this is EB&L's number 1 locomotive. You see the water tank in the background. And I think there's probably a coaling tower, I'm not sure. Another view of their little diesel there. And so this gives you a little bit of an idea of the extent of the East Branch and Lincoln in the White Mountains. It's operated from 1893 to 1948. So the connection with the Boston and Maine would have been down here in the lower left corner of the screen. And, because this was pretty much a logging railroad, they just laid the track down where the trees were. And when they cut down all the trees, the railroad went away and went someplace else. Another shot of the water tank back there at Lincoln. And then the group went over to White Mountain Central Railroad. The Heisler's no longer in service, but everything else is pretty similar to what it had been back in 1990. No, this was 1971. Whatever. Going through the covered bridge. Again, the number 4 there. And this is number 4 in a picture that I took in October, beginning of October, actually end of September, I guess it was, up at the White Mountain Central. As I said, no longer in service, but other than probably needing some boiler work, quite well maintained and on display. But back then, working hard. Coming back out of, for those of you who haven't ridden the White Mountain Central, they basically pull down to the end of the line, get accosted by the Wolfman, and then come back with the Wolfman ranting and chasing the train all the way back. And but coming back, you know, they run around and pull backwards. Back at the station. One more view, a couple more views of the Heisler going up to get water, fill her up. And then everybody gets back to Lincoln and we gather around for a last picture here before heading back to Boston. And so you can see the train stretched out in the distance. The Lincoln station was on the other side of the track, but you can see the water tank off in the distance and so on. So we get to our third trip for tonight, February 26, 1972. The third annual last run of the our snow train that went basically up the western route through Lawrence, Dover, on up to North Conway, a route you can't take anymore because tracks is gone between Ossipee and at least there's a major washout just north of Ossipee. So it's owned by the state, but it's not in service. So these were all Bud cars, except because of the snowstorm, as you will see, they added a couple of Jeeps, the GP18 and GP9, onto the head end of the train. For several years, the RRE had been advertising the last snow train because the B&M kept threatening to abandon the line, and then they never did, or they hadn't, and we'd run another snow train. And I'm told that for this one, there were some people, it's like crying wolf, and after you know, when this trip was advertised, that few people said, well, it was supposed to be the last run last year and the year before that. So there's this other steam event going on. So we're going to go do that. And they never did get to ride the Conway branch because this indeed was the last run. 580 passengers, bargain price $13. And this was, this trip was a memorial to Raleigh Blodgett, who'd been the longtime trip director for the Railroad Enthusiasts. At that point, we were the New England division of the Railroad Enthusiasts, and the 470 Club, the 470 Railroad Club, technically was also a division of the Railroad Enthusiasts. And you know, the Conway Scenic Railroad was just getting started. By Dwight Smith, and he had acquired number 47, which of course is now 7470. So that was on display. Long day, 8:25 a.m. Return about 9:30 p.m. And we won't go through all the text here, but let's just say it was. The writing on the trip flyers was could get to be rather florid at the time. And actually, this little bit at the end here, originally, I guess they had wanted to take this trip, take equipment out to North Bennington, and for a variety of reasons that I forget at the time, that never happened. So they ended up doing the snow train again. So off we go. North Station. Snowing to beat the band. This is a photograph that Alan McMillan Jr. took. He was actually working for the B&M at the time, just starting out his career with the railroad. And he got himself assigned to this train very deliberately. You can see the, I think it's the Hotel Manger in the background, Hotel Madison, I guess it was at that time. And then Art got on at Bradford, which was near where he lived. So this was a train arriving in Bradford. You can see already having picked up a fair amount of snow on the pilot. And it by the time they got to North Conway, snow everywhere. This is another Alan McMillan shot. He hopped off the locomotive and trudged through the snow to get this shot just as the train had arrived. And lots of ice, lots of snow, bitterly cold. People getting off the train. Some people not wearing particularly stunning footwear. And one of the things at the time, this Conway Scenic was just getting started. The station was still all boarded up and not in use. A far cry from what it looks like today. So they got there, they had a runaround move. This is the old freight house, which has been quite nicely restored. The North Conway Model Railroad Club has its headquarters down at the north end of the building. So the two Jeeps were cut off the train, run down there, running around. Snow everywhere. Every now and then I try to recognize people in these pictures, but this was again before my time, so. And there's 47 in the roundhouse. I'm told, by the way, I'm sure most of you know about the unfortunate fire that took place on January 2nd, the morning that Conway Scenic was going to do an outing with the 7470. Fire started in the cab and did some fairly substantial damage. I was talking today with Brian Solomon up at the Conway Scenic, and most of the damage has been repaired, and it's looking like the locomotive will be back in service sometime this year. So anyway, now this is just prior to the departure back to Boston. And actually the rear end of the train is up at the station, and folks were able to walk down and catch some shots of the head end a bit further on down the line toward Conway. And I'm not quite sure how Art got these shots from the inside, but this is just a view forward from the engineer's stand and from the fireman's seat as well. And just a last look back at the station there. And Alan McMillan got this shot just before the train left. And I guess that is, yep, so that's all of that one. Questions, comments? I think we got enough time to, if people are game, to move on to the Canadian Atlantic trip. So happy to do it if folks want to go ahead. Any questions or comments about what we did so far?
Dave,
Yes?
I'm sure you know, but everybody may not. The Claremont Railway was originally a streetcar line as well as carrying freight. They ran streetcars between the Claremont Junction station on the B&M's Con River line and downtown city of Claremont and up to West Claremont. So that was the last streetcar operation in New Hampshire, and I think it ran until about 1940 or so.
Well, I have to confess, I did not know that. And so I'm glad you added that, Len.
Well, you could add on the Claremont Railway, because I also volunteered down at the Seashore Trolley Museum. The Seashore has the Claremont Railway line car number 4 we use for maintaining the overhead wire. That's been nicely restored, and the Seashore uses it on their wire work. So it's dating from back around 1900, I think.
Okay. Shall we move on? Hopefully we can get this to work with the other one without too much trouble here.
Yeah, sounds good.
A few years ago, that line car number 4 was leased for several winters to the MBTA to keep their lines clear.
Okay, so as I said, this was an excursion that you folks did. And I was fortunate enough to ride it. It was a 2-day trip. And so off we go. So there was a couple of nice handouts. This was a trip book that the 470 Club put together. There was also a nice book that the railroad had provided. It's pretty much your standard trip book, very similar to sort of things that Len did for many years for us. Milepost listings, some timetables, photographs, etc. And so I've got some maps to throw in here. I think hopefully everybody knows where Brownville Junction is. So the train started here in Brownville, and unfortunately some of the waypoints are not shown on this, but the first segment basically took us across what at one time been the Canadian Pacific. Now at that point it was Canadian Atlantic Railway to Mattawamkeag. And so we start out at Brownville Junction. We had bring up my there we go. Need to think, tells me what's what. So whoops. We start off at Brownville Junction, RS 18, 1864 on head end. And we had 3 units. The third one is RS 10D 8023. And there were a total of 6 cars on the train. There were these 3 green coaches that were actually leased and brought in from the Lamoille Valley Railroad. And then there were 3 Canadian Pacific business cars at the on the rear of the train, including an open platform observation car, Mount Stephen. So about ready to set out. Moving along, this is at a red signal at the east end of Hardy Brook, milepost 889.9. It's probably red because the signal dropped after we entered the block. And continuing on, approaching the Penobscot River Bridge. And just a quick look out the window at the Penobscot River as we cross. So the first stop was at the first day was at Mattawamkeag. So these are the three Canadian Pacific business cars that were on board the train, nicely appointed with, you know, curtains and so on. I'm not quite sure who was riding in those. Expect probably all the bigwigs from 470 Club. And then we had a photo run by here, and the engineer really knew how to put on a show with some smoke for us. Unfortunately, even all that diesel exhaust wasn't sufficient to ward off the black flies. This was June. In May, and the black flies were having a feast on those of us gathered around trying to photograph the train. So again, this is the end of the train with the business car on the back. And let's see. Oh yeah, so I guess this was quite an outing for the CP folks as well, because number of kids are climbing up on to get cab rides in the locomotive here. So we move on from Mattawamkeag and continue on the line. It's all very scenic territory here. Danforth and over to Brattleboro, the Canadian border there at Vanceboro. Couple of RRE stalwarts, Bill Crawford with the camera in the center, Carl McKinney, who was later president after Bill, on the left side. Just had to throw that in. And so this is another photo run by Lambert, Maine. Does seem like the train was perhaps a bit overpowered, but. And then coming into Vanceboro, this is the 3-stall engine house, looking quite derelict. Turntable and turntable pit there. Then we come up to the station at Vanceboro, obviously seen better days. And we can see the Canadian customs agents waiting there in the shade to board our train and do the border inspection as we continue along our way. This was a via stop. This was the Atlantic, of course. I'm not quite sure when the Atlantic was discontinued, but I know I never got a chance to ride it. So from Vanceboro, we continued on to McAdam and McAdam Junction. And then all these maps, by the way, are from a site called Open Railway Map. It's one that I would highly recommend. openrailwaymap.org is the address. And if you zoom in close enough, it'll have a lot of information about lines both still in existence and things that are have been abandoned. It's an open source site, so it's reasonably up to date. Like any open source thing, I wouldn't guarantee 100% accuracy. So anyway, in this next segment, we go up to McAdam and then go down the St. Stephen's sub as far as Watt Junction. And then the rest of this, the brown dash line indicates a track that's abandoned now, but we actually continued down the, was called the St. Andrew Spur. And then at this point right here, at the bottom right of the screen, the track that continues down on the right side, which of course would have been bearing left as our train was moving, used to go all the way down to St. Andrew. And this part over here, which is the part we took, went to the an industrial park there. We tied up for the night there and were bused to the Algonquin Hotel in St. Andrews. So here we're headed into Canada, crossing the St. Croix River into Canada. And our friendly Canadian border agents are checking all of our paperwork as we continue on our way to McAdam. Nice smile on the gentleman's face there. They certainly seem to be happy to have us coming to town. So we get to McAdam, classic stone, quite elaborate depot building. It's still there. So a fairly extended stop over here. See the canopy on the track side of the station, some of the elaborate large brackets supporting it. This is a view. This would be the north side of the station viewed from the west. Very large building. While we were there were a couple of RS-10s with caboose over here. I think this probably worked the freight that would go down the St. Stephen's sub. Our engineer who came on at McAdam, along with young friend, grandson perhaps, in the cab. And so we continue on. Little detail of some of the stonework there on the station. And getting ready to depart. And we would just go forward, and immediately just east of the station is the junction with the St. Stephen's sub. And off we go. So continuing down, we come to Watt Junction. Watt is a place where the St. Andrew spur branched off. It actually goes off there, I believe, down that line of poles towards St. Andrew. And no, actually we continued, I'm sorry, we continued straight down that on Saturday. And in fact, there we are passing the section house at Watt. And then continuing on further on the St. Andrew spur. So at that point, we were headed down this line here, and it's a little more detail of what I from what I showed before. So we continued down here. This was the line that had gone all the way down to St. Andrew, you know, probably right to the hotel. This was abandoned at the time of the trip in 1990. And so we went down what was called is called the Champlain, actually was, because it's no longer there either. It's now a trail. Anyway, down the Champlain spur and into an industrial park there. And at that point, we were met by buses who transported us down the road to the hotel. And then the next day, on Sunday morning, we were bused back over to St. Stephen. I'll get to a little more detailed picture of that shortly. And headed back up to Watt Junction. So continuing further on down toward the industrial park, a public loading track, a couple of box cars there. Or this one on the left side looks kind of suspicious. And then nice view out over lake as we continue on down. And then we finally get to where the, this is shortly after the split with the Champlain spur that we're on going off, and the what had been the line to St. Andrew, which has been abandoned. Rails been taken up there on the left. And this is the northern tip of Lime Burners Lake. And you can see the railroad grade for the St. Andrew spur continuing on down along that. So we get to the end of the Champlain spur, and we're actually pulled in on a my notes say that this was a Star-Kissed plant. Could be wrong about that. I could be wrong about everything, who knows? But you note this tank car here, and I don't know the whole story, but anyway, we get down pretty close to the mill and or the factory there, whatever it is. And apparently, and I really don't remember the details of this, but we apparently picked up this tank car, and I have no idea what we did with it. I'm hoping maybe Jerry Anger will be able to fill me in on that. I'm hoping that he'll be popping in on this tomorrow night. So anyway, there we were. And at some point there, we got bused down to the Algonquin Hotel in St. Andrews. Absolutely gorgeous, big resort hotel. Obviously, even then, even though it didn't have railroad service, doing quite well. And the interior dining room, all very grand and elegant. The veranda dining room, as this was called, that overlooked the grounds. So this was just sort of a closer look at this is the St. Andrew spur on the right side, continuing on down towards St. Andrew. And we had come in down there into what's now known as the Bayside Industrial and Marine Complex. And of course, as I said, all out of service, converted to a trail now. So Sunday morning, we go by bus, and the train had deadheaded over to St. Stephen overnight. And so it was waiting for us when we got there in the morning. And this was the former station in St. Stephen. At this time, this was the public library, sign on it. And we just snuggle up next to it there. So I got curious, wonder what happened to this building. And it's not the library anymore. There's actually a new public library built over to the left there. But the depot is very much there, actually looking better than it did when we visited in 1990. And it's now a restaurant and brew pub. It looks quite spectacular on the inside. This is a Google Street View screen capture, which is why you see this little Google symbol there. And then just another view of before we left. It's the old freight house that's not there anymore. And of course the station there. So we're getting ready to leave. St. Stephen. And this was the so this was the Milltown branch, which also let's see, we'll go back up here a little bit. Oh. I have a slide out of place, I think, anyway. Or I forgot to put it in. Okay, anyway, the Milltown branch was, this was still in service. This is gone now too, but the track conditions were not good enough to allow us to travel on that. So we're heading back up to northbound, looking up toward Watt Junction again. So the track our train is on is here on the left side, and that's the St. Andrews Spur there on the right side of the picture. And we did a run by here at Watt. And again, you know, they shuffled the train around so the business cars were still on the rear, but you'll note that the observation car was no longer the rear car. And we get back to McAdam, a view from a different side of the station. This is from the eastern side. And then this was again back at Vanceboro, Maine. Jerry Anger here chatting with the U.S. Customs officials there. Presumably they had, I expect they'd probably gotten on the train at McAdam, reversing the move that the Canadian officials did. So we're almost back and managed to get a shot of one of the old granite Maine Central mileposts that says the P155, 155 miles to Portland. And one last run by before we finish off the day at Lakeview. And it's kind of hard to tell, but this was a little plaque marking, it says at this place on December 10th, I think it says 1891, it's hard to read the date. The last rail was laid on the International Railway of Maine, achieving Canadian Pacific service between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. A little bit more smoke to close out the day on the run by. And that's all, folks. So that's it.
All right. Yeah, that was good, Dave. I guess
Thank you.
open up to any further questions, comments.
Well, I'm wondering about Macadam, New Brunswick, because I know somebody was involved in that project over there. I believe that railroad station has been, if it hasn't been fully completed, it's supposed to be completed.
Which one would that be, Dave?
The railroad station, that slide that you have of Macadam,
Yep.
because I know somebody that was working on that project. I think his name was Peter Campbell, and they were working vigorously to get that restored.
Yeah, it was hard to tell what condition the building is in now. I mean, it's certainly still there. You can see it on the Google satellite view and the 3D view, but unfortunately, that's one of those areas that there's no street views, and it's not one of those places that have been magically modeled in 3D so that you can swirl around the building and really see what it looks like. But definitely there, and certainly a landmark building. I have no idea what it's used for now.
Dave, I've heard the same thing, that it is either completely restored or nearly completely restored. Because it used to be a hotel, restaurant, as well as a railroad station originally.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suspect there's a, architecturally unfortunate sort of catwalks around over the canopies, which they probably had to put in at some point to meet egress requirements for its use as a hotel. Kind of mar the appearance of the whole thing.
The passenger station that had a VO Rail logo on it, the VO Rail no longer operates the Atlantic as of December 16th of 1994.
Yeah, so it was still active at that time. It's one of those things I kick myself that I thought about doing back when I was a young rail fan with time on my hands and never got to it. But yeah, it would still have been in operation, and of course because of that, the the whole business of border inspections would have been fairly well organized at that point, with probably regular inspectors assigned to the task. And of course, the Atlantic actually did carry a dome car across it too, so yet another loss.
I was down in Calais today, Dave, and I saw New Brunswick Southern moving a whole bunch of train cars, and I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, that's part of the St. Croix spur. So you were right in that area. I just wanted to let you know that I did see rail traffic there today. So I told some of the guys on 470.
There's still active line of business down there, but a lot of the things that just connected, like connecting directly from St. Stephen to Calais, all that's gone, and of course the Calais branch is gone too. So if you want to ship something to St. Stephen, it's a long way around the barn to get there.
My name's Howard. I do know that the connection to Calais is still there. They actually run wood chips and other stuff into Calais, and they're picked up by the Woodland paper mill, tissue mill.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yes. The Woodland tissue mill actually owns the track from Calais to the plant. It's about 11 miles. And they actually crisscross to go back into Canada, then back into the States again.
That must have played havoc with them during all the COVID restrictions.
I'm sure it did, but that's their operation.
Just have the crew get vaccinated every day and you're home free. I saw an interesting thing in the total digression, but since I started it, there was some guy in Poland was arrested when he was basically getting himself vaccinated like every day or something like that, and then selling the vaccination cards. So, and he made the mistake of going up to the same vaccination center 2 days in a row. But there's one guy, hey, it's proof the vaccines are safe, and that guy will never get COVID. So anyway, but we digress. Seems like a hard way to make a buck, but so anybody else got anything here?
Well,
Oh, Alan, I'm sorry, Alan, I just saw your thing in the chat. I presume you were talking about the Canadian Atlantic trip. It was June 2nd and 3rd, 1990.
Okay, well, Dave, I guess that may have covered the questions. So yeah, that was a great presentation. I think, unfortunately, 470 Club hasn't been able to run excursions like that in recent years, but wish we could.
Actually, it's, we're about the only people left around that are running excursions.
Well,
And,
the
it
best
is
thing. Mhm.
more and more difficult to do anything. The province in Worcester used to be very friendly to us, and
Mhm.
that our contact there, even into the Genesee and Wyoming days, had a major stroke and is no longer working, and so it's just it's tough, and between all the railroad, all the lines that you guys ran in the 80s and 90s, and that Mass Bay ran in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s. Just the lines that they're not there anymore. Yeah. It's not coming back to the golden days. It's, I don't, maybe we'll do another trip on Amtrak someday, but who knows? At least we've got friends there. But anyway.
Good. I guess, well, yeah, well, thanks again, Dave, for some great views there. And I see there's a chat question for you there. Maybe you can fill in the response about that.
Oh,
that
sure.
website.
It's, yeah. Actually, let me just.
You may want to type it in. I think you said it was openrailwaymap.org, but you can type it in while you're typing.
I'm going to copy and paste it in.
Okay, while you're doing that, I'll just remind people next month. Let's see, we got presentation on the 470 steam locomotive, our namesake from the New England Steam Company. So that be May 18th. So hope everybody can join us then at that point.
I will. I need to toss the host back to you somehow, and I'm not quite sure how
if you want.
But I'm not quite sure how I do that.
Well, I think at this point it probably doesn't make too much difference because we'll probably be so as soon as you
okay.
finish that.
Well,
chat.
I hope that it's too bad. Unfortunately, our town decided to hold its town meeting on the 17th and the 18th, so I will not be able to tune in for next month's program. But
Dave,
yes,
I can give you Peter's email if you want to reach out to him for a program for your club.
would you please? Yeah, I'm rather envious. There's a time about a year ago, Alan, you were calling me up asking for referrals on programs. And now the tables seem to have turned, and I gather from what I read in your newsletter, you've got programs lined up into the fall, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to scramble for something for next month. So
Oh. All right.
yes, please send
Okay.
something along.
Okay.
All right, well, if you're host, I guess you can hit the button to end the meeting.
Okay, well,
And
if
then-
nobody's got anything else, I guess, thanks for watching, and see you around.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
Mhm.